Famous people who passed away in 1733. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. Gilbert Heathcoat. He was born in January 1652 and he died in January 1733. His age was 81 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Gilbert was an influential English banker and politician, playing a key role in establishing the Bank of England and shaping Britain's financial landscape. He also served as the governor of the Bank of England and was Lord Mayor of London in 1711. He became a freeman of Windsor Company in 1681. On 30th May 1682, he married Hester Rayner, daughter of Christopher Rayner, merchant of London. He was living in the parish of St. Dunstan's in the East in 1682 and established a business as a merchant in St. Swithin's Lane, trading in Spanish wines and other produce. He took his first step in corporation government when elected Common Councilman for Walbrook Ward in 1689, and in 1690 he succeeded his father. Heathcoat was an agent for Jamaica from 1693 to 1704, furnishing remittances on behalf of the government for the troops there. Thomas Woolston. He was born in November 1668 and he died in January 1733. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English theologian whose controversial views on biblical interpretation sparked widespread debate and influenced the development of theological thought. He became possessed with the notion of the importance of an allegorical or spiritual interpretation of Scripture and advocated its use in the defense of Christianity, both in his sermons and his first book, while attacking what he saw as a shallow, literalist interpretation of contemporary divines. The old apology for the truth of the Christian religion against the Jews and Gentiles revived. For many years, he published nothing but in 1720 the publication of letters and pamphlets in advocacy for his assessment of the Old Testament, with open challenges to the clergy to refute them, brought him into trouble. It was reported that his mind was disordered and he lost his fellowship. From 1721, he lived for the most part in London on an allowance of £30 a year. King Augustus II the Strong. He was born in May 1670 and he died in February 1733. His age was 62 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Augustus II, also known as the Strong, was a monarch noted for his ambitious rule over Poland and Saxony and his contributions to the arts and culture in Europe. In order to be elected king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Augustus converted to Roman Catholicism. As a Catholic, he received the Order of the Golden Fleece from the Holy Roman Emperor and established the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's highest distinction. As Elector of Saxony, he is perhaps best remembered as a patron of the arts and architecture. He transformed the Saxon capital of Dresden into a major cultural center, attracting artists from across Europe to his court. Augustus also amassed an impressive art collection and built lavish Baroque palaces in Dresden and Warsaw. In 1711, he served as the imperial vicar of the Holy Roman Empire. His reigns brought Poland some troubled times. He led the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the Great Northern War, which allowed the Russian Empire to strengthen its influence in Europe. Robert Price. He was born in January 1653 and he died in February 1733. His age was 80 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. Robert was a Welsh judge and politician renowned for his role in protecting constitutional liberties during a period of political turmoil in Britain. In 1682, Price was appointed Attorney General for South Wales as well as Alderman for the city of Hereford. The following year he became Recorder of Radnor, then Steward to Catherine of Braganza in 1684, Town Clerk of Gloucester in 1685, and King's Counsel for Ludlow in 1686. Price was removed as Attorney General and from the other offices in 1688. He later successfully opposed William III's 1695 grant of lands in Denbighshire to William Bentinck, 1st Earl of Portland, earning the appellation Patriot for his native country. He was appointed a judge in Wales in 1700. Robert Price also served as Member of Parliament for Walberley during this period, resigning the seat in favor of his elder son Thomas in 1702. Elizabeth Hamilton, Countess of Orkney. She was born in 1657 and she died in April 1733. Her age was 76 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was an English courtier from Villiers family and the reputed mistress of William III, King of England and Scotland, from 1680 until 1695. She was a lady-in-waiting to his wife and co-monarch Queen Mary II of England. Elizabeth is reputed to have become William's mistress in 1680. In 1685, Mary's father, James II, exploited rumors of William's infidelity. In an attempt to cause a split between his daughter and the prince, Mary II died on 28 December 1694, and within a year or so, William ended his relationship with Elizabeth Villiers. Motivated, it is said, by his wife's expressed wishes before her death in 1694, two men fought a duel, reputedly over the affections of Elizabeth Villiers. John Law, then still a penniless young man, killed Edward Bew Wilson on 9 April 1694. Sir Richard Cox. He was born in March 1650 and he died in May 1733. His age was 83 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was apoplexy. Sir Richard was an Irish statesman and jurist whose reforms as Lord Chancellor left a lasting impact on Ireland's legal and administrative systems. He qualified at Gray's Inn, London in 1673 and was apprenticed in the manorial courts of the Earl of Cork in 1674, apparently on the advice of his uncle John. He made an imprudent marriage to Mary Bourne, a girl of 15 whose family he later claimed had grossly deceived him as to the size of her dowry. Although the marriage itself was happy enough, he quarreled bitterly with his mother-in-law about dowry, retired to the country for a time, and then resolved to make his fortune at the Irish bar. He built up a lucrative legal practice, was appointed Recorder of Clonakilty in 1675 and Recorder of Kinsale, and acquired an estate in Clonakilty in about 1687, but he lost his recordership after the accession of James II. He moved to Bristol. Ulria Eleonora Stolhammer. She was born in 1683 and she died in February 1733. Her age was 50 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a trailblazing Swedish soldier who defied gender norms by serving in the military while disguised as a man, making her a symbol of bravery and resilience. She did not participate in active warfare, as she was posted in the garrison of Kalmar, which did not see any action during the Great Northern War. Nevertheless, she was successful in her professional conduct and eventually promoted to the rank of corporal. Reportedly, she preferred to rent a room rather than to sleep in the barracks. This was permitted and acceptable through somewhat unusual among common soldiers who normally preferred not to spend their meager salary on special sleeping arrangements. On New Year's Eve 1716, she became engaged to a maid named Maria Longman and married her on 15th April of that year. It was later reported that Lohman thought that Stahlhammer was impotent, but that she was content to live without sex. Bernard Mandeville, he was born in November 1670 and he died in January 1733. His age was 62 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was influenza. He was a Dutch-born English philosopher whose satirical works, particularly The Fable of the Bees, challenged traditional views on virtue and societal progress. He moved to England to learn the language and succeeded so remarkably that many refused to believe he was a foreigner. His father had been banished from Rotterdam in 1693 for involvement in the Klosterman tax riots on 5th October 1690. Bernard himself may well have been involved. As a physician, Mandeville was well respected and his literary works were successful as well. His conversational abilities won him the friendship of Lord Macclesfield, who introduced him to Joseph Addison, described by Mandeville as a parson in a tie wig. There is a surviving image of Mandeville, but many details of his life still have to be researched. Although the name Mandeville attests a French Huguenot origin, his ancestors had lived in the Netherlands. Claude de Forbin, he was born in August 1656 and he died in March 1733. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French naval officer and nobleman and diplomat. From 1685 to 1688, he led a diplomatic mission to the Ayutthaya Kingdom. He became a governor of Bangkok and a general in the Siamese army and left Siam shortly before King Narai fell ill and was deposed by the 1688 coup d'etat. Returning to Europe, he got involved in the 9 Years' War and the War of Spanish Succession. His daring exploits earned him fame during his service under King Louis XIV. High-spirited and ungovernable in his boyhood, he ran away from his home and, through the influence of his uncle, entered the Navy, serving his first campaign in 1675. For a short period of time, he quit the Navy and entered the Musketeers. There, he killed the Chevalier de Gordon in a duel and was sentenced to death by the Parliament of Aix. He managed to obtain a grace and joined the Navy under his brother's identity. Ippolito Desideri, he was born in December 1684 and he died in April 1733. His age was 48 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian Jesuit missionary and one of the first Europeans to study Tibetan culture and Buddhism in depth, leaving behind valuable ethnographic accounts. He left Rome in 1712 and embarked from Lisbon to Portuguese India, arriving at the port of Goa 1 year later. From Goa, he traveled to Surat, Ahmedabad, Rajasthan, and Delhi, arriving in Agra in September 1714. From there, he returned to Delhi, where he met his superior and travel companion, the Portuguese Jesuit Manuel Ferreri. Together, they traveled from Delhi to Srinagar in Kashmir, where they were delayed for 6 months, and he suffered nearly a fatal intestinal illness, and from Kashmir to Leh, capital of Ladakh, arriving there at the end of June 1715. According to him, they were well received by the king of Ladakh and his court. and he wished to remain there to found a mission, but he was forced to obey his superior. Rodrigo Anastasa Almeida Jimenezes. He was born in October 1676 and he died in April 1733. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a distinguished Portuguese nobleman and statesman who played a significant role in the politics and diplomacy of his time. The Marquis of Abranches enjoyed a significant international projection in the first half of the 18th century, first in the service of King Peter II, but mainly in that of his son and successor, King John V. While acting as the king's representative in the papal court and afterwards in the Spanish court, he was a major player in two significant events in the history of Portuguese diplomacy: the embassy to Pope Clement XI in 1716 and the exchange of the princess in 1729 upon his return from Lisbon by royal decree of June 1718. He was made Marquis of Abranches, and the title was conferred the additional privilege of honors of king to the king. Nicola Kustu. He was born in January 1658 and he died in May 1733. His age was 75 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French Baroque sculptor, celebrated for his dynamic and elegant works, many of which adorn the Palace of Versailles and other iconic landmarks. When he was 18 years old in 1676, he moved to Paris to study under Antoine Kosovo, his maternal uncle, who presided over the recently established Academy of Royal Sculpture. At the age of 23, he won the Colbert Prize, which entitled him to 4 years of education at the French Academy at Rome. He subsequently became rector and chancellor of the Academy of Painting and Sculpture. From 1700, he worked with Kosovo at the palaces of Marly and Versailles. He was remarkable for his facility. Influenced by Michelangelo and Elgardi, he tried to combine the best characteristics of each. A number of his works were destroyed during the French Revolution. George Byng, 1st Viscount Torrington. He was born in January 1663 and he died in January 1733. His age was 69 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Royal Navy officer and statesman. While still a lieutenant, he delivered a letter from various captains to Prince William of Orange, who had just landed at Torbay, assuring the prince of the captain's support. The prince gave Byng a response which ultimately led to the Royal Navy switching alliance to the prince and the glorious revolution of November 1688. As a captain, he saw action at the Battle of Vigo Bay when the French fleet was defeated during the War of Spanish Succession. As a flag officer, he led the bombardment squadron while serving under Admiral Sir George Rooke at the capture of Gibraltar, and then took part in the Battle of Malaga. At a later stage in the same war, he was sent to the Mediterranean to thwart any attempt by the Spanish to take Sicily. He encountered the Spanish fleet at Naples, and after pursuing it down to the Strait of Messina, sent ahead his fastest ship, causing the Spanish fleet to split in two. Louisa von Berghausen. She was born in 1698 and she died in January 1733. Her age was 35 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a Swedish memoirist who became famous for her story about her time in captivity as a slave in Russia after being taken prisoner by the Russians during the Great Northern War. She was sold as a slave several times before she eventually recovered her freedom, and her story became perhaps the most famous of the many stories of Carolinian fates of this period. On the way to the Russian camp, another soldier demanded to have her, and when the first one claimed that he intended to give her as a present to his captain, the second one wounded her in the chest with his saber. She fainted and woke up in a tent where she cried for her mother until her throat was so swollen up she lost her voice and lost consciousness. She was taken to Moscow and given as a present to Russian General Prince Nikita Rapnin. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.